Ace before beauty again.
There we go.
It's just going to become a running theme.
You've coined my phrase. Oh, well, there's a reason why we coined that phrase.
Why?
It's true. I mean, we tell the truth here.
That is correct. We are nothing but truth tellers here. So get out of the way. And guess what? Are we going to tell some truth this morning?
Yeah. And I just absolutely can't wait, because this is going to hit multiple on my top 10 bad list of what I hate the most, which is government corruption, good old boys club. I can't stand eminent domain, civil asset forfeiture.
Don't even get me started on eminent domain.
Oh, I know. I mean, and roll into that, Jenny, roll into that, the EUAs, the emergency use authorization, which what they did in COVID. The government is way off base in every one of these things. And I can't stand it. And these are all unelected people. And we got to find a way to expose them. And I can't wait to do that.
Well, and I think and here's the funny thing. I'm just going to tell this anyway. So I didn't find Whitney. Whitney found me. And I'm wondering, I'm going to pop this off and see if Whitney is ready to come on. Are you ready to come on? Okay. So do you want to say how you met me?
Sure. A good friend of mine and I had been digging into the ethics reports, just trying to figure out like who was mainly donating to the transportation committee chairs. And somehow that crossed wires with some of these groups. I want to say one of them was Redbud and Joffrey Long.
Redbud reporting. Yes.
And so then going and searching for those terms led us to your map or diagram of all the different entities that are moving money around. And so then that's whenever I watched your show. You had Carmen on that day, and she was talking about the judges, I think, and her website, which I think is really, really fantastic.
If people will use it.
True.
CarmenGrider.com. Well, so, Whitney, I am so glad you found me and Michael, because we are, for I think people who regularly watch know this. So I live in Luther, and we had the turnpike come through here. And one of my very good friends lost the entire back half of her pasture. And she was trying to figure out, well, what do I do? Because the turnpike ran right through it. Right? What do I do? I mean, what am I gonna, I have this, and there were many, many people in Luther that were very, very unhappy about the way this whole thing was handled. And I might even add, I've gotten on to the Kickapoo. It was so crowded. Oh my gosh. It was like bumper to bumper traffic. I was like, I'm so grateful to OTA that we have this thing and that you stole so many people's property for this, because it's bumper to bumper traffic.
Right. There's no one on it.
But that's, I mean, you're kind of giggling. I'm making fun of it, but it's not funny. Yeah. This isn't funny. So I want you to start telling me. We have some slides for you, and I'm just going to go ahead and bust a move and get them on. And you tell me about what is going on.
Well, this map, I wanted to start with this because whenever we had our first Capitol rally after they announced access, it just happened to coincide with the 30th annual Congress for New Urbanism. And so they had a summit here in Oklahoma City. Well, one of their
back up, because you have to listen to these names. The 30th annual Congress
for New Urbanism. So they kind of focus more on like walkability and things like that. But one of their founding members happened to let me contact him, and I said, hey, come to our Capitol rally. And he was kind enough to come. And so he introduced us to the freewayfighters.org. And you can see there's like 3 different types of monikers there. Ours is kind of like a mitigating. So you've got the Oklahoma City, and then the Tulsa little moniker, I think that's for a removal. But there's like a movement going on all across the nation. And it was really nice in the beginning because you do feel so isolated when you're trying to fight a project like this because most people don't care. And so to have like a network behind us, that was kind of encouraging just because you get a sense of being belonging and having support.
So my question then would be so you've got two organizations, Pike Off Oklahoma, Pike Off OTA, and then Citizens Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation, correct?
Yeah, so we started out with Pike Off as a 501c4, so we would have more freedom at the legislature.
That's dark money, Whitney.
Well, we don't have very much of it, and it's all going to legal bills. So, but we started out with that, vehicle, and then as we've kind of moved forward, we realized that the name Pike Off OTA, at least when it came to a lot of the legislators, they kind of took that as being negative. And
wait, let's all cry for them. Shall
right.
we? That their feelings are so sensitive.
Yeah.
So does anybody know what this is? That's the smallest record player in the world playing the saddest song just for them.
Yeah.
And I say this honestly, Whitney, because they've said the same thing to me over the years when I've said vote no, or I've said, whatever. Well, that's just, I don't care. I'm done with caring about your feelings. Okay. But anyway, so that was Pike Off OTA.
Right. And then so Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation, it is way more in its infancy. But big picture, we just wanted to have a name that was a little bit more proactive. And if you want to go to the next slide, I'll introduce you to Tassie. So a lot of the slides that I pulled today for this came from our interim studies, and she put together quite a few of them. And so I just wanted to give her recognition. And we also attended the Freeway Fighter Summit in Cincinnati, Ohio last fall.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
It was really cool because there was a lot of different people there, like different interests. Like some people actually worked for the DOTs, or they worked in the municipal planning, and, they got paid to go to this thing. And then there was people like us that are just trying to either prevent bad planning or, mitigate existing just problems that people have. Like, for example, there was one woman from New Orleans, and they are actually trying to get some grants right now to do some Clean Air Act testing around the highways, because they've been put into these communities where you have all these little kids playing, and you've got, elementary schools, and when you have that much CO2 coming off, you're going to have asthma, you're going to have problems. So it was a really interesting meeting, and it was the first time they've ever had a summit. So I'll be interested to see how that can grow, because I think we had about 30 people that attended, but I think it could be a bigger deal in the years to come. And then also, two things that I should bring up. We had two cases that we were able to get all the way to the Supreme Court. We ended up losing both of them because our Supreme Court justices are, you probably already know.
They're great.
Yeah, they don't let their politics influence their decisions.
No.
But Tassie was the lead plaintiff on the Open Meetings Act case.
And that's right. I forgot. Can you just brief everybody on the Open Meetings case? Because that was a really great case. I can't believe that you lost that. Just brief us a little bit.
So it was going really well. That we actually had some success in, I believe it was district court. And if you'll remember, the OTA, before they announced access, they purchased a bunch of domain names like no Turnpike, Oklahoma, no Turnpike through Norman, Oklahoma. Oh yeah, like there was like 15 or 20 of them of domain names. So they knew that they were going to have some political opposition. And then they announced the Turnpike in a manner that was just kind of elusive. With the Open Meetings Act, you're supposed to make sure that you're speaking in a way that like the general public can understand. It's not supposed to be legalese. Yeah, whatever. But then the Supreme Court ended up reversing that one. The other case that we had that made it all the way to oral arguments at the Supreme Court, that was a dispute over the actual statute and whether or not they had the authority. And it was a split decision. The dissenting opinions are a lot more cohesive, in my opinion. And it's interesting because the dissenters, I'm remembering correctly, all three were Governor Stitt appointees. Okay. And they're kind of the younger ones on the bench. And it was really surprising. I think it was Justice Winchester, when the oral arguments were going on, he was mocking the OTA's attorney and like making these little hand gestures and jokes. And we walked out of there thinking we had it in the bag. And then it was like, what? You authored the opinion? And it was just very interesting. And then we ended up finding out.
Well, but wait, I mean, that's a little frustrating to me that a sitting judge was mocking an attorney. I mean, I get that it was the opposing side, but still, I don't even get that.
Yeah, I mean, he even like made a joke about what were we supposed to do? Just close our eyes and let you do whatever you want. And that's basically the ruling that they came up with.
Wow.
We did find out about some questionable real estate transactions, though, that occurred between Winchester and one of the former OTA members. And if you've noticed, next to Penn Square Mall, they're about to do a bunch of development, and that's right around where that property was. So not saying I know anything happened there, but it just seemed kind of questionable.
Well, but
that wasn't Winchester. It was one of the other justices. But anyways, it just reminds me of what's going on at the federal level with just some of the questionable real estate transactions that they've been questioning with, I think, Justice Thomas.
Well, not even that. I mean, you think about all that's going on in the stock market. Lots of interesting things going on there. Okay, so you've got the two separate entities, and then you went to the Supreme Court on the issue of the open meetings, and that didn't work. And then you went to the Supreme Court on the issue of, I still wasn't quite sure what the last issue was.
Basically, we were saying that they had to get everything done under one single bond indenture. And they came back and said that, you know, we're just going to give OTA basically broad discretion. So it was interesting. Sorry, I was just getting. Oh, I'm sorry. It was Winchester who was involved with the real estate.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Yeah, he wasn't the one that mocked them in court. But
okay.
Anyways, that's neither here nor there. If you want to go to the next slide real quick.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is why I'm super involved. I was a political science major. I did some training in law school. I ended up working with people on Social Security and Medicare, and that's what I do now for a living. But this property, and this is just a goofy little diagram I made just using like a Google map, but that property that has the big red arrow, that's where my parents live, and that's where I grew up. They had their house for sale. They were wanting to retire, to downsize. My dad's sick of taking care of all that property. And so the day that they got an offer on their house just happened to be February 22nd of 2022. That was the day they announced the access plan. So my family ended up calling OTA and saying, hey, you know, we're for sale anyways. Here you go. And they said no. And so instead of going through, you know, a few properties, the neighborhood across the street is the one that is probably going to get eliminated. And so from my perspective, it became political power.
Wait,
you know,
okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So the part on the bottom with all those houses is the part that they want to use, not the part above that with 3 properties.
Right. And I mean, it's hard to tell exactly for sure because you're looking at a map that looks like someone drew a crown on a map when you look at the Access website. All we know is that they told my family, we don't need your property. We're just going to destroy your front entryway to build a side road or something. But it essentially locked my family into this house that they were trying to sell to downsize. And, you know, I think to have political power, it's a lot about money, but you also have to be involved. Because if you just have money, but you're not actually involved politically and you're not part of that elite crowd, it's not enough to just have money. But when you don't have money or involvement, then you really don't have any political power. And that's where it just starts to look like abuse from my perspective.
No, I think from anybody's perspective. I mean, that was part of the whole reason why the Pilgrims came here. Well, the Pilgrims, everybody who emigrated to get away from the crown in England and the tyranny that imposed upon people, came here so that we didn't have to have that. And I think that's the thing that people, they see this, many people, I'm hoping most people, oh, please tell me it's most people, look at this and get that this is like way screwed up, but they don't see that what we have right now in the personification of this kind of thing is what we had in Europe, where we had King George saying, you will do this and I own this and you don't get to catch, you can't hunt on my property and I own all of this property and you can't cut down a tree for wood to heat your house because I own all of this. So I don't think people are understanding that we may have left there, but we're right back where we started from.
Right. And what happens too in these like long range projects is it causes disinvestment, because why am I going to keep improving my property if I don't have any assurance that the future is going to, be a bright future? And so there's a lot of people that just feel like they're under threat. And then if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so I don't mean to trigger anybody, and I just want to give everyone a full disclosure that I do not connect with either of our parties right now. I think we're being controlled by a uniparty. Yeah, but this is just to make the point that when Oklahoma became a state, we were Democratic for a very long time. And it wasn't the Democrats of today. It was Democrats of this era where they were the ones who were, initiating the Civil War and opposing Reconstruction. And they were founders of the KKK. Like, it was a very different time of our state's, history. And so the other side of the Democrats and the initial Democrats who ran Oklahoma, they were pretty connected with the railroads and with the oil and gas industry. And it was kind of like under the surface, but a little bit of just perspective on what Oklahoma was like in the beginning. And if you want to go to the next slide. Sure. So this one just makes me laugh. This is from the Oklahoma Historical Society's website. Basically, the highway building before the Interstate National Defense Highway Act, I may have confused that a little bit on the wording, but before 1956 and before the federal funding became 90-10%, so 10% state, 90% federal, highway building was just super disorganized. And this is where a Kansas turnpike literally turned, but people would just fly off of it into this guy's field. And he ended up having to sell all of his cows because his cows kept causing damage to people's cars when they would end up in his.
No, you mean the cars were damaging the cows?
Well, the other way around.
The cars were in the wrong place. The cows were in the right place.
Yeah. So just something funny. But after the, Eisenhower passed the Interstate Highway Act, that's whenever this kind of stuff ended up getting a little bit better. But it just gives some ideas about, how unorganized and incompetent highway building was back then. If you want to go to the next one. And so so this is before the Interstate Highway Act, but if anybody has a chance to read The Power Broker, it is a daunting task, but it's the best book I've ever read to give perspective on what political forces can cause mega projects. And Robert Moses was the master builder of New York. He had this method, which was just barrel right through. We'll go to court later and figure it all out. And also, he's one of the founding, ideal members of the debt financing. So we're going to take on all this debt to finance mega projects, and then we'll just charge the people for it later, right?
Our schools do that too.
Mm-hmm. With
schools do that for building as well. Mm-hmm. Public schools.
And then if you want to go to the next one. So I wanted to bring this in because at that top right corner, one of the guys who had been working for the Turnpike Authority decided that he didn't agree with everything that they, were doing at the time. And he ended up getting retaliated against. And I just wanted to bring this up because this culture of retaliation still exists today. And
oh, yes, it does.
Big time. I mean, we've seen 2 engineers now who have pretty much lost their jobs because they didn't agree with everything that the Turnpike Authority wanted to do. So that culture of retaliation, I don't think that's gone anywhere. I think it's still a big problem. Like Michael said at the beginning, it's the good old boy patronage nepotism problem. So, and if you want to go to the next one. And so when Turner Turnpike opened, I think I'm frozen, maybe.
No. Oh, you are. That's okay. We can hear you though. So keep going.
Okay, it'll catch up. Yeah. When they opened the Turner Turnpike, it was a huge success, and it actually generated a lot more revenue than they had initially thought it would. But instead of paying it off, they went ahead and moved forward and started a couple more.
Michael's giggling. You can't even finish that sentence. He's done.
Of course.
And they just kept, refinancing. I'm going to grab a drink. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Whitney. Again, it's not funny, but I just want to reiterate, because I know that Michael will, and I'm sure you will later on. Didn't OTA say, no, once we get these toll roads paid off, man, we're done with that. We're not going to charge anybody a toll.
Yeah.
Huh.
That was the
original. I could have sworn that's what they said. No, get this done for us. Help us get this done, because we'll quit charging tolls after we pay for it. Michael, didn't you hear that?
Yep, sure did.
Yeah. I mean, that's a utopian ideal, though, to think that the government is going to turn on a spigot of money and then ever turn it back off.
It's what we say about government expansion, right? I mean, that's why you don't let them expand, because once they expand, they're like a rubber band. They just keep pressing and pressing and pressing and pressing. But soon they'll break it.
That's right. I don't think it's a sustainable model at all.
No, they'll break it. That rubber band's going to go ping. I just hope it really hits somebody in the face. Lots of them on the way down. That's all I'm hoping. They get, Oh, did you accidentally get your eye put out? Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, you're good. Let's go to the next one, please. Okay.
But I did love that dress.
And so, what went wrong? How did we go from celebrating and there were even these turnpike like swimmers, like the coordinating swimmers from back in the day, and they would do these little it was so weird.
No way. Seriously?
Wow. Yeah, it's super weird. But how did we go so wrong? And I think there's 3 things, if you want to go to the next one. Before I get to the 3 policy failures, I just wanted to bring up, so Oklahoma's culture, if you start at statehood, we had our first bill that the legislature passed was segregating rail cars by race. So they ushered in all these Jim Crow policies right whenever Oklahoma became a state. And then, you think about in the 1920s, we had the Tulsa Race Massacre. Also, something that they didn't teach us very well in history books, in my opinion. That's when the KKK really kind of took over a lot of government functions. It wasn't just the legislature. It was judges, police officers. It was a big deal. And so
oh, yes.
I think it's important just to know that. And then I have a funny story. So I've got a client that's in a small town here in Oklahoma, and I was doing some research about this kind of stuff, came across this story about a bootlegger who got shot on his front porch by the KKK. Well, it happened to be my client's great-grandfather.
Oh, and wow.
Yeah, so crazy. So, I'm asking him about it. She's like, oh, yeah, it's because old Bob, he was a bootlegger. Well, Oklahoma didn't allow hard liquor until 1959. And it kind of reminds me of what's going on with marijuana right now, because when you have, you know, illegal activity like bootleggers or people who are doing shady things now with the marijuana, there's a lot of money in that. So I think it's significant that Oklahoma didn't actually allow hard liquor till 1959. And it's because there was a thriving bootlegging industry.
Yeah.
Then you had 1965, which is what this was, when the Supreme Court justices went through their scandal and admitted to taking bribes and, you know, basically selling their opinions. And then 70s and 80s, you had Ox Scam, where 220 county commissioners, I think, were indicted. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was the county commissioner scandal. Yeah.
How many actually went to jail? But then you had in the 80s and the 90s, the misuse of the school bond money, where they had taken so much money out that they couldn't figure out what to do with it. And some of it ended up in a bank in Japan, and just a lot of weird stuff that went on there. And then, you know, fast forward to now, just not, I think it was less than a decade ago, the nursing homes got in a pretty big scandal because of some of the shady stuff that they were doing. So I think we just have this like underlying culture of corruption in Oklahoma, and it seems to be very industry.
Out on the Gene Stipe years. You forgot about those.
Yeah, he's the reason we have term limits. And, you know, I'm mixed opinions on those, because when you have term limits in the legislature, the institutional knowledge that we demand and we need for functioning government, it doesn't exist. That's how the tail starts to wag the dog. And that's exactly what the OTA is doing right now.
Yeah, but then that's the tricky part, though, because then the longer they stay in, the more entrenched they become and the more corrupt they become. I mean, you look at the federal level for that, you know, I mean, that's a shining example.
It's a catch-22. I completely agree, because, you know, look at, you know, Dr. Fauci, how long he's been in office and how entrenched all of that is.
He's been in office, right?
Yeah, pretty much. He has been in office
for a very long time. So, and then if you want to go to the next one. Okay, so the three policy failures that we'll just kind of go through today, it's cross-pledging, the revolving door between government offices and industry, and then just gross mismanagement of funds.
Okay.
The first one, if you want to go to the next one. So cross-pledging, and I have to give Tassie the credit because she did these slides, a few of these. So it allows the OTA to use money from the revenue positive turnpikes to fund the turnpikes that do not bring in enough revenue.
Stop.
Yeah.
I can't even get past the first one. What am I going to say, Michael?
Well, I was going to say your favorite guy is here on the screen.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, seriously, what's the problem with number one?
It's a blank check.
But not only that, why, if the turnpike is underutilized, did we build the dang turnpike?
Yep.
For the future, Jenny. For 50 years from now. We're putting investment into the future.
But see, to me, now hit me if I'm wrong, Whitney, because you're the expert here. I'm just the crazy mad lady like normal. So I just look at this and I think that's where we went wrong immediately. I mean, if you're talking about, well, we have an underutilized turnpike, then the traffic patterns didn't require that you take over somebody else's land and property so that you can build it. I mean, am I wrong? Is there something wrong with my thought process there?
No. And one of our strongest advocates, who is an engineer, she's an engineer, she's a professor at OU, and she works for ODOT. She would be way more qualified to tell you about this, but they basically reverse engineer. They don't do the feasibility studies. They don't do the environmental studies up front. They go ahead, get their plans pushed through, and then they reverse engineer the studies.
No, they do not.
Wow.
Because OTA is not subject to the same laws as ODOT. And think about that. That's not just talking about reverse engineering and making sure we're doing things in a chronological order. That's talking about complying with the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and all of those things that are designed at a federal level to protect the people. They don't have to follow that. So they don't have to do environmental impact statements.
Yeah, that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, why, Whitney? Why?
I mean, how is that even legal?
Yeah.
Because they do not technically take federal money.
Oh, Michael, it's the survey thing, right? We can give kids dirty surveys if we do it from the state because the federal didn't give it. So then the federal FERPA and PPRA doesn't apply.
Yeah. Well, you know what's even more crazy, Jenny, is if you're a local farmer, rancher, landowner, you know, if you retain water or you build a pond on your property or something, that's not going to stop the federal government from coming in and the EPA and everyone else and fining you $50,000 a day for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to an organization like the OTA, hey, you guys do whatever you want. It's fine.
It's very maddening. And this is another reason that I was so passionate about this in the beginning, was because in law school, in administrative law, we talked a lot about this. Like the Administrative Procedures Act is a very important piece of legislation. And for the OTA to just be able to circumvent those rules, it's very disturbing. And they have these memorandums of understanding where they
that's a worse word than the F word. MOA, worse word than that.
Yep. So go to the next one if you don't mind.
Wait, I wasn't finished with this one. No, in all seriousness though, Whitney, do we know why OTA is an entity unto itself that doesn't have to subscribe to all of the laws that the rest of the people do?
So it goes back to debt financing. And so HNTB, which back then was Howard Needles, Tammen, and Bergdorf or Bergendorf or something like that. Okay. They brought the idea to the governor back in like 1947. And they did it for a purpose because the federal government would not give them money to finance our DOT. And so this was a way, and this was another reason it was so celebrated, because the state desperately needed money to pay for roads, and they couldn't get it from the federal government, and they couldn't somehow come up with it on their own because Oklahoma is just a bunch of thieving politicians most of the time. And so letting it be a debt finance project with revenue paying it off, it kind of made sense back then, because where else were they going to get the money?
Okay. And actually I can kind of see that because we were the, kind of redheaded stepchild, if you will, of the United States, since we kind of, came in at the end and were the catch-all for everything up into that.
And we were troublemakers too.
Probably not in the right way, though. Not in the way that we would like to be troublemakers. But so how is it then that this has gotten, rolled over from year to year to year, and it hasn't been changed and modernized and updated so that, because my goodness, our state government is willing to give away money to everything. So I'm sure that, we have plenty of room, money for roads now. Why has that not been changed? Do you know?
I think once we get through this and you see the revolving door, no, it's okay. I think the revolving door is going to be what, in my opinion, it's the biggest problem. And go to the next one.
Okay.
Next slide, I believe.
Wait, failures are subsidized by successes.
Mm-hmm.
Yikes. Okay.
So this is just kind of showing you that we do have a few, like the Turner Turnpike, the H.E. Bailey, the John Kilpatrick. Those are our revenue positive turnpikes. And then on the right side, these are some of the more troublesome turnpikes, the ones that aren't necessarily making enough money. And Oklahoma is not unique in this cross-pledging thing. They're doing the same thing down in Texas, but they call it a turnpike system instead of, just each turnpike being its own little thing. So we're not the only, problem child around here. If you want to go to the next one. So this is kind of just big policy statements of what we've been talking about. Like we keep refinancing, we keep using more and more debt, and we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Nothing's ever going to get paid off if we maintain this type of system.
Well, I like that. Would you pay off your credit card with another credit card? And sadly, people today, there's a big chunk of them who would go,
yeah. Well, and I made that slide too back when the federal interest rate kept getting raised. And so it was like even more asinine to keep doing this at the higher interest rate.
Yeah.
And then the next one. So this is something Tassie put together. A little bit about Tassie. So she studied in Cuba, and she studied the collapse of the Soviet Union, I believe. She's a anthropologist. And so her background is in all of this Soviet style leadership. And this is just kind of talking about how when we centralize planning and we take the power away from locals, there can be really bad consequences. And the next slide shows us an actual example. So the Aral Sea, centralized planning was taking place, and it ended up having really bad outcomes on the actual people that were locally, situated. And the point that she was trying to make with this slide is that, like Michael said at the beginning, we're dealing with people who are appointed. They're not elected. So the board members of the OTA, they don't have to be accountable to local people who have to suffer the consequences of their decisions.
Well, and let me up that too. So they're appointed by the governor.
Right.
The governors in Oklahoma have 2 terms. So what happens when a gubernatorial appointed official, the governor is not elected after 2 terms, Governor Stitt's going to be gone. What happens to the officials that he has appointed to the positions?
Historically, a lot of them end up stepping down, and the new governor gets to put in new people. And so that actually is a great segue into the legislation that we passed last session. It was House Bill 2263. We passed it with Danny Sterling. Basically, it says that instead of the governor getting to have all 6, the Speaker of the House gets to nominate 2, and the Senate pro tempore gets to nominate 2. And right now, they're trying to say that they're going to take that to the court to see if it's constitutional. But you'll see in a later slide that we've already gotten some input from our Attorney General on that. But yeah, I mean, we're trying to break up some of that power, because you hit a great point. When we do get new governors, they get to put new people in these positions, and it's just a patronage system.
Yeah. But here's another problem, though. So let's just say that the people that he appoints step down at some point. Well, the people that his appointments put in don't. That's called the swamp.
Yeah.
See, that's called the swamp. And so what happens is when those appointed officials step down, all of the people that were under them are following the person that was appointed, that they were hired under, right? And so when the new appointee comes in and says, well, I want to do blah, or we're going to do, well, our previous appointee, he did it like this. I mean, that happens all the time. So on one hand, I can totally see that, yes, once they leave, then you do, in some cases, have to start over. But few appointments go in and get those, send their policy people out packing. They usually keep them, and then you just recycle all the problems you've had before.
And the cronyism, it directly leads to cost overruns. So we, the general public, end up paying for all of the externalities of those type of policies.
Yeah.
This is just funny. They still haven't paid for themselves in 2612. But, it also shows you that I think that's where they refinanced to build additional turnpikes. So the refinancing is one reason why we don't see this going away. And then if you want to go to the next slide.
Okay, but can I ask a specific question? How do you refinance a toll road?
So they're refinancing the revenue bonds.
I'm going to have to dig more deeply into that because that went over my head.
If we really should have one of these days, if we could, we really should get Tassie or Amy on here, or even I've got a friend Cheryl who used to actually work with revenue bonds, so she understands it a lot better than I do. But essentially, the bonds will be coming up to their maturity date, and instead of just letting them expire, they'll refinance because they are able to get more money. And in all honesty, I mean, think about it. During COVID, everything slowed down so much. Right. And if they were just barely getting by on their budget as it was, and then all of a sudden they didn't have as many people paying tolls, I mean, there was a very big disruption that happened during COVID. Yeah. So I can see why they would consistently refinance, because that's how they're paying for maintenance, repairs, anything that they may do. But when they really need big money, that's when they go and they get these bond indentures, and they go have the Supreme Court approve it and all of that. But I think it would be really interesting to be a fly on the wall during COVID and know what was being said, because I'm suspicious that some of the short-term loans that they had to take out and all of that, it had to do with the huge downturn in the revenue that they had. And maybe that's why they proposed such a big project. But you'll see this project is not as new as we think it is. So this is the policy failure number 2. And this is another reason I think that we haven't seen this go away. There's a revolving door between political offices and industry. And so again, HNTB, that's the guys that gave our state this idea to do debt financing, right? And then if you go to the next slide, so there's Neil McCaleb, who worked for HNTB. He was the Secretary of Transportation, the Director of ODOT, the Director of OTA. He even had some positions with I think the Bureau of Indian Affairs for a while in the Department of Interior.
I believe so.
And then on the right side, this is back in the 90s, whenever they tried to build this exact outer loop, and the city of Norman wouldn't take it. And we talked about this in constitutional law. It was a shining example of a rare occurrence where political pressure actually works, because they put enough political pressure on these people that the project went away.
Well, I do want to make the point again. So Neil McCaleb was Secretary of Transportation, Director of ODOT, and Director of OTA, just like Tim Gatz was.
Tim Gatz, yeah.
Gatz, sorry. I want to add an N there. Neil McCaleb also had his own road construction company, correct?
Imagine that.
I think so. I believe he's in real estate too. If you go to the next slide.
Okay.
Well, so Jenny, sounds like he's the most qualified person to do all of it. That's why they don't need all this other stuff. They only need 1 or 2 guys in all these instances.
Sure.
And that is a logical argument. And I've heard that from a few people that, you know, it's not illogical to have experts in these positions. But when you do have people sliding in and out of industry and government, things start to get really confusing. Like even this 1999 article, they're calling him out of the Daily Oklahoma, and they're saying engineering consultant Neil McCaleb. He was all those other positions at the same time. And the Daily Oklahoman is confusing him as saying he's the engineering consultant. I mean, it just starts to blur the lines of who are we actually serving? The contractors or the people of Oklahoma?
Well, but again, if you're a contractor, was Neil McCaleb getting any business from any of the turnpikes or roads, I wonder?
It's a great question. I mean,
it is a good question when you think.
Isn't that Governor Stitt in that picture also?
Yeah, and Tim Gatz. And I think Mike Patterson, Neil McCaleb. Yeah, there's a couple of guys. And that picture is totally unrelated. I just thought it was funny because they're all in there. Yeah, if you'll go to the next one. So
hey, somebody, there are lots of you watching this morning. Somebody just give us a thumbs up that they get this, that they understand what the problem is here, because there are lots of you watching, but we need you to get how bad this is.
Well, look here. So Governor Drummond agrees. And he actually said you cannot hold dual offices. It's against the law. And so that's why Tim Gatz stepped down. And that's why Joey Kelly is now the deputy director of OTA. He has a salary of $240,000 per year. So he got a raise. And Tim Gatz is over ODOT. And I think his is $245,000 a year or something like that. And maybe they deserve every penny, maybe not, but at least the Attorney General agrees that you should not hold dual offices. And I think this happened with Ryan Walters too, right?
Oh no.
Secretary of Education at the same time as superintendent.
Really? Oh no, I can't imagine that happening.
Yes. So right now, Governor Drummond is our friend for sure.
Right now.
We just never know.
At this moment in time.
Yeah, politicians are unpredictable.
Yeah, you don't know. And it's a shame, too, that we're actually calling somebody who administrates the law a political person.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a good thing.
Yeah. And so, okay, I just wanted to make sure people understood why this outer loop with Neil McCaleb is so important. So this is back in the 90s, right? And back when all that political pressure happened and everybody thought that it went away. And there's Neil McCaleb again. And then if you want to go to the next one.
Wait, I just want to go back to again.
Mm-hmm. And so this is all just more, newspaper articles from back then, but enough pressure happened that they said, okay, we're going to listen to the people. We're not going to do it. And so when that project died, what happened next? And if you go to the next slide, oh, sorry, rest in peace, outer loop. Then the next slide. So here's what happened. The developers who follow around these turnpikes, and
I don't want to talk about this. I'm going to get even madder.
So there's land speculation going on, and there's all these people who, the people in the know knew this would come back someday. And so not only are people who are losing their homes to eminent domain up against their government, they're up against industry and the real estate market and all these developers who are really betting on this, or, wanting to have another John Kilpatrick going right through rural Norman so we can put a Topgolf down there and a Dave & Buster's or whatever.
But see that, but that is the important thing.
Yeah.
These developers buy that land up because they know that what they're going to do as soon as that thing goes through there is they're going to put a Dave & Buster's. They're going to put a couple of gas stations. They're going to put blah, 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 blah. Well, it's the land developers that make the money.
Yep.
Never mind the poor sod who worked, 80 years on his property and it had been in the family for 200 years. It doesn't matter. Who cares about that guy? We have a damn Dave & Buster's there. Hey,
well, these are the same guys also that are on your city councils and in all these other organizations they're all connected to each other, and they know the long range plans. They know the plans 5 and 10 years from now.
Yep. And then think about what that does. My sister is a teacher in Jones, and the number of kids in her class before the Kickapoo compared to now. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I think she went from having like 10 or 11, maybe 12, and now they're pushing 20. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot to everybody, because I know when I went to school, there'd be like 30 kids in our class, but that was right before Moore split into the 3, right?
Yeah, and that wasn't a rural area. This is a rural area.
Yeah. So it puts pressure
and the land development out in Jones is just, I had to go through there for some reason just recently, and I couldn't even believe it.
It's hard to recognize. Yeah.
Couldn't even believe it.
So then let's go to the next one. So this was that Capitol rally, the first one I was telling you about. and just a funny little cartoon.
Oh, it doesn't look like anybody was interested.
Not at all. But that came from one of our papers back in the 90s. You know, oh, one of these days when they do build the loop, this might be relevant again. Okay, so this is another thing. So not only are developers speculating, but look at how much of an increase OTA has had in recent years of selling surplus property. So going back to the Robert Moses method, when you go do these mega projects, you buy more than you need because you're going to develop the outer edges of it once you get that project built. Yeah, and so that's kind of what I think some of this is. It kind of looks like OTA is getting into the speculation business. I don't know, but definitely an uptick.
I don't think I can go on. And let's just take a minute. Let's just take a minute. Whitney,
that's the good old boy kickback graph right there, Jenny.
Again,
sorry to interrupt. Take a minute. Go ahead.
I'm going to lose my nugget even worse than normal. So, Whitney, do we own our property in the first place? I'm just curious.
I don't know. I mean,
no, we don't.
No, the answer is no. The answer is no. What happens if you don't pay your taxes, Whitney?
That's right. They can come and take it.
So, do you even own your property in the first place? No, you don't even own this stuff in the first place. They own it. They're just renting it back to you because of their benevolence.
You're a beneficial owner.
Great.
You're a beneficial owner, Jenny.
So we've got somebody who's commenting on the live chat on Rumble who says, let's not forget the city of Norman regulations say East Norman must sell 10, 20 acres, not one and less. So development could include green space.
But you got to understand why that's so important. So the reason that's important, though, is because of the Garber-Wellington aquifer. So all that green space and all those tributaries and all those creeks, that is how that aquifer is getting refilled and recharged. So when we pave over that, we are actually going to harm our water supply. And that is water supply for, I think, city of Del City or Midwest City, one of those two, Moore and Norman.
It's all of us. I mean, we're all sitting on the top of that aquifer. Are you kidding? I mean, it's huge. I mean, a little bit of the Agala up in the north, but, you know, mainly it's the Garber-Wellington that fuels all of Oklahoma with water. You know what? I'm going to the next one.
So more on the revolving door. So here's David Streb. He used to work for ODOT. Now he's the president of Poe and Associates, which is the lead design firm for Access Oklahoma.
I almost can't even take it.
Yeah. And then go to the next guy.
Okay.
Here is the former Public Works, Sean O'Leary, who now works for Poe. There's rumors that Tim Gatz' son also works for Poe. Yeah, the connections never end. And then,
well, but that's the whole crux of the issue is we're here because people don't know how connected and interconnected all these guys are. I mean, we have to do this kind of stuff, and we have to almost shame them and make fun of them in a way, because if we don't, people aren't going to understand the severity, and until 5 years from now or 10 years from now, when there's no way to reverse, you know, anything that they've done. We have to stop them. We have to start now in order to start exposing all this stuff.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, and the worst part about it is, you know, like we talk about regularly, people just want to live their lives. I mean, they don't want to know half this stuff. I mean, those of us who know it are pretty much mad all the time.
All the time.
You know, it's like, I really just want the blue pill so I can go back to being stupid and happy.
Well,
you know?
like Whitney with her family. I mean, until you're like the directly impacted at your family and financial and future level, I mean, people just aren't engaged. And that they take advantage of that. They take advantage of, you know, people's just lifestyle in today's time.
Yeah, they do. That's exactly right. And then, so the first session that we were able to get any legislation pushed forward, it wasn't the most successful because we figured out really quick the Association of General Contractors has a big stronghold on our legislature. If you go through those ethics report, not only does the PAC donate a lot, but individual members who own construction firms, design firms, all of those guys, they're all heavily donating to our legislators. And, you know, some people tell me that that doesn't matter and that doesn't influence. And I would strongly disagree. I think that if you're getting money from people, it's
well, so if that's the case, Whitney, and people are going to tell you that, then your follow-up question is, so why donate then?
Yeah,
exactly. If it doesn't influence policy, why are you donating? These people aren't in your district. It's like what we talked about with Carmen, you know, that day about oh gosh, what is his name? Greg McCourtney.
Right.
And the fact that only 11% of the money that's gone through his campaign account over the course of his Senate seat, only 11% of that came from the people in his district. So who elected him?
Right.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me if the people in his district aren't electing him, that he's listening to the people in his district.
Right.
How does that work? You can't, I don't know how you can argue that with me. That simply, I mean, I'm shrieking. Listen to me shriek. Because it doesn't make any sense. And when people say stuff like that, I'm like, no. Then tell me why they donate then. If it's not, you know, if it's not influencing, why do they donate? And then you have the legislators who say, well, that doesn't influence my decisions. Then why take the money?
Exactly.
Because I have to run a campaign. Why can't you run a campaign from the people in your district? Because they won't donate. Then why do you need to be elected?
Yeah, exactly.
Am I wrong?
No, I completely agree.
See, these are the things that we've got to start saying out loud multiple times to multiple people so people understand how screwed up this system is. And that when they throw those little cute little sayings off the top, well, they don't influence me. How? You explain to me how they don't influence you, because 90% of your money comes from them.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I completely agree. And you got to think too, from my perspective. So I work with people on Medicare and Social Security, and I had to learn a lot about the kickback structure and all of that stuff that goes on behind the scenes with doctors and foundations. And, you know, this kind of stuff can be translated into a lot of different areas of our life. And if we don't start talking about it and don't get people to have at least some awareness of it, it's almost like social engineering that starts taking place.
No, it is social engineering. That's why it was
100%.
in there in the first place. That's what this is. You were talking about your friend who we do need to have come on the show because she understands the parallels between America and communism very, very well. That's what all of this infiltration of the communists was in the mid 1800s, was to do exactly what they've done right now and make us think that this is all somehow American when it's not.
Right. Yeah, there's no free market involved in this. If you have a turnpike that fails, it fails. That entity goes out of business and you go forward. This whole thing about being subsidized and just the revolving door, and then you have the same people. I've said this multiple times, Jenny, and you know this. I've been part of the problem, you know, my whole life, because I was so busy just trying to work and say, you know, I was disconnected from all of that politics. Plus, I just made it out, you know, I was like, hey, those guys know what they're doing. You know, just stay out of my way. I gotta go play some golf. You know, basically that's how most people, I think, live their lives. And until we continue to hammer this stuff out and just really get it in people's faces, nothing's going to change.
Right.
So sorry,
no.
When you come on this show, you're going to expect some ranting, and I apologize.
Sorry.
Hey, I don't mind at all. So then the last policy failure that I wanted to highlight, and this again, these are slides that I pulled from the interim study before we passed House Bill 2263. You know, how does this actually work? So the bond investors are lending money.
That's a great slide.
Yeah, I think Tassie made this one too. She's really good at these. But what happens? The banks get richer from the fees, the drivers get higher tolls, communities get destroyed, and these real estate transactions become more questionable. And why would they turn off that magic spigot of money? It's a utopian idea to think that it would ever really end.
That is a great slide. Yeah. And I want to ask, I mean, all the people out there who have driven on the John Kilpatrick Turnpike, have you seen how high the tolls have gotten? Oh my gosh, I think aren't they triple what they started now? I know they're double for sure, but I think they're almost triple. So not only did the OTA say, as soon as we pay these off, you get to have them for free. Not only did they say that, but now we're up to triple tolls from what we had originally. And they count on the fact that we're not going to remember what it cost us to do it in the first place. It's the same thing with inflation. I'll give you a really good example. So the other day I went to go buy dog food. We have 100 dogs, so I have to buy in bulk. So I was buying our regular 50-pound sack of dog food that a year ago cost us about $22. Well, not only is it not 50 pounds anymore, it's 48, and it cost me 27. But people don't count on me having that number in my head and going, wait, I cry BS on all of this. You're just overcharging me and shorting me 2 pounds. They don't get that. I mean, they literally know that so long as we've got our friend and our Fender tickets and our endless Netflix streaming, that we're not going to go, hey, wait a minute, what are you people doing? Because it's, again, we're in Roman times, right? Yes. We're in Roman times. So long as we can be entertained away from the fact that our government has us by the throat, then we're all good, right? So I mean, this, sorry, again, rant. I apologize. Please go ahead.
Well, let me even take that a step further, because with Social Security and Medicare, you know, I've been doing this now since 2018. Anytime the consumer price index goes up and changes, or inflation and all that, so there's a cost of living adjustment. And they give people on Social Security a raise, and then they increase the Medicare premiums just a little bit. They increase the deductibles just a little bit. Everything just gets a little bit bigger. Why have they not been increasing the gas tax with the consumer price index? Why did we just let that stagnate? You know, that's one of the reasons our public roads, not managed by OTA, have as many problems as they do, because they've just let that tax stagnate. And I know I'm in Oklahoma and I'm supposed to say we never add taxes or whatever, but we add all the time. People just don't realize it because it's happening at that federal level. And so it's just mind-boggling how we've just let that one sit in the past.
Well, but you've also got to look at this too. I mean, they hide so much stuff. Look at this grocery tax that everybody's falling all over themselves to say, oh, look what we did. We got rid of the grocery tax. It means very little to people, but you ask them when they're going to get rid of the property tax. Ask them that question. No, because we want to own your property. So and those people, if you ask people, do you own your property? They'll go, yeah. And I'll go, no. And the reason why they don't know that is because most people have a mortgage on their property, and all of their taxes and their insurance come out in the mortgage payment. And so they don't even really stop to think about the fact that what's in my mortgage payment I'm having a fit because mine went up $166, which means that it was either the taxes or my insurance that went up. And people don't stop to marry these thoughts together and go, wait a minute, what's going on? And they count on this. That's why they bury that stuff. That's why they tell you, oh, we're going to do this, and then we're not going to charge you any tolls for that afterwards, because they know you're stupid enough to buy it. Sorry, people. Sorry, just saying it.
Well, it's true. And so this was just some of the stuff in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. You know, they were getting in trouble with the SEC. There was some people in the legislature that were actually saying, hey, we need to get rid of this. This is a problem. They're not responsible to anybody but the person who appointed them. They don't care about the taxpayers. They just build roads wherever they want, and they don't care where it goes as long as they can issue the bonds. And there's a lot of people who have their hands on these bond deals. I'm sure there's a lot of people making a lot of money off of this stuff. I mean, there's a reason why the Royal Bank of Canada wants to sell Oklahoma revenue bonds, you know? And then if you want to go to the next one.
Well, can we look at number 1? OTA director and board member found to be buying OTA bonds, violating conflict of interest laws. Here's my favorite part. Let's all read the next part together. No charges filed. People, we're so getting so screwed over by these people we elect that we think are doing, and never mind, go ahead.
Well, this is just a little bit more from the 90s. So there were some pieces of legislation that did get some traction.
But they all failed.
Yeah.
Shock.
And at that time, you know, we're looking at OTA having $664 million of debt. This is my favorite part. OTA gets in the airline business. Let's go to the next one.
Airline.
Yes. So Great Plains Air ran up debt everywhere it landed. They promised nonstop flights coast to coast, but the airplanes bought didn't even have the fuel capacity to reach the coast. This screams Mena, Arkansas and Barry Seal to me, but I won't go there. And then
so in other words, the CIA is running the OTA?
I didn't say that.
I'm just saying. Well, I mean,
I just said
who knows?
It seems familiar for some weird airline stuff to be going on. But so that was pretty funny. Not only was it a big failure, but it was diverting money from where the money should have been going in the first place.
Well, that's my question. How did we even, why were they buying Great Plains Airline? Well, I mean, what even was the rationale behind that?
I could tell you. I mean, I guess nowadays, if you look at it, like the aerospace kind of does fall under that Secretary of Transportation. And so I think it goes back to that centralization of government. You know, why is it centralizing so much that they think that they need to have their own airline? It's very weird.
Why are we doing workforce development for children to funnel them into the airline industry?
Yep. And then by now we're looking at $1.1 billion worth of debt. There's multiple rounds of refinancing. They announced there probably would be no more turnpikes for a while. And then in 2015, Mary Fallin driving forward program started, and we had some more toll increases.
Another Republican governor, right? Yeah.
Yep. And then the driving forward program, total cost was $1.5 billion. So it had a cost overrun of around $627 million. Then if you go to the next one,
that's not very much. $627 million. I mean, what is $1 million anymore? Right.
Right. Michael? And this slide is actually kind of old because this was before, I believe this was before they got the half a billion dollars or whatever, 500 million that they did get approved. So this is actually a little bit outdated, but if you'll go to the next one, it shows you if they get up to nearly $7 billion worth of debt with this access program, look at how skewed that amount of debt is compared to other state agencies. The Grand River Dam Authority at least has a cap on what they can get in their bonds. It's a statutory cap. And that's something that we would like to try to do in statute eventually. But, it is very, very hard to get legislation passed up there, because right now we're hitting roadblocks with those transportation committees. Going back to how I even found Jenny, just trying to understand these people, because when they're nice to your face and they make you feel like you're so important and everything's going so well, and then push comes to shove and you can't get your legislation to even hit the committee for a vote, what is going on here?
That's a good question. What is going on here?
Yep. So this was Access. This is just off their website. I just like took a screenshot of it. 15-year project, $5 billion. Now that's closer to $7 billion because of some of the delays. Then we can go to the next one. So this is kind of how our group formed. Immediately, a Facebook group kind of came together, and it was just a place for everybody to kind of vent, honestly, and try to like make some.
So you guys would like me there then?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's sometimes I'm like, like we don't even want to put our nonprofit name on the group, because sometimes it gets a little rowdy. I'm not going to lie.
Well, but here's the interesting thing. Gosh, I guess nobody's interested because you only have about 8.4 million or 4,000 members. Mm-hmm. Gosh, that's not much.
It's been a really interesting dynamic, because I think it's very good for people to have a place to go and to, share ideas and just make connections. But it also can be nerve-wracking sometimes, just because of liability and all of that. You don't ever want anyone to do anything too crazy.
Well, and I get that, but I hate to say this, but I'm just going to say it. I mean, I'm in trouble most of the time anyway. So what am I going to be in? More trouble? At some point, I think people are going to have had enough. And I don't know what that looks like, but I mean, it could look like something not great, because when you oppress people and they've they get up every morning and have their blue pill, and they go about their day, mm-hmm. At some point they become like Michael. Well, and like me way back in the days of, HW, when I was like, what do you mean you're subsidizing everybody's prescriptions? Aren't you supposed to be a Republican? What the heck? That's what woke me up. And I was like, okay, something's weird. And then from then it was just, me going, why is government spending my money doing all this stuff that I don't want them to do? So, right. I mean, we've got to get people to hold their nose and take the red pill and figure out what's going on, and understand that until they wake up and push back, they're not going to own their own property. They're not going to, these people who are in these seats of power are just going to play the revolving door game while we sit here. And the other reason I hate the two-party system, and the other reason I hate everything right now, we're all arguing over stuff. So these people are running around going, they're too busy telling each other how stupid they are. I'll just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people.
Do you remember learning about Clara Luper?
Oh, yes. I had Clara Luper for a teacher. That's how old I am.
Well, that's amazing. I just finished her book, Behold the Walls, and I briefly remembered talking about her in Oklahoma history, but what her book made me realize is that it was not just like, okay, we're going to go do a sit-in at Katz Diner and it's going to go smoothly. Like, they put up with years of just people being so cruel and so awful. And it wasn't just Katz Diner. She went to restaurants all over Oklahoma. And then, we had the sanitation strike, and she was there with the sanitation workers. And it was just very revealing that those people who can be a catalyst for change, they don't do it overnight. It takes a long time and a lot of heartache. And from her book, what I really got is that her sense of humor kept her going, because anybody else, I feel like, would have just been crushed by the oppressive forces. But somehow she had this faith in God and a really good sense of humor that kept it going. So I just hope that people who are trying to be good catalysts for change just be patient and repetitious, and have the ability and the willingness to just keep moving forward. These articles, so now we're in modern times. This was in 2022, whenever we found out about the Access program. We had engineers raising concerns about the selection, the future of the watershed, and then there really were no justifications. Like if the DOT would have done this type of project, they'd have to get public input, they'd have to do environmental impact statements, they would have to have 3 options and then even a no build option, and then the public would get to comment on all of that. And we don't get any of that with the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. So if you want to go to the next.
Well, but can I just point out something quickly? We do. I mean, they give you, like, for example, you know, out on 66, they're doing all this work. And before the turnpike, they would have all these meetings where you could go and you could comment. But the problem is all of those meetings are run in a way where the facilitators structure the questions and help funnel your responses into a manner in which it all comes out looking like that, you know, yeah, we give you the green light, go right ahead. So there's a lot of that Soviet style. Yes, we'll have a meeting and they make you feel like you're in charge, but then you go and the facilitator facilitates your ideas right out of your head into their pocket.
So we had the experience, the first big gathering that I can remember, we had an organizing at a church. And thousands of people showed up, and nice. OTA didn't show up. They sent David Streb and 2 of his, you know, minglings from Poe and Associates, and they stood on that stage for 2 hours while the public just berated them. And I loved it. I loved seeing them have to just sit there and
eat it.
Yeah, I mean, they were not having a good time. So that meeting was interesting. Well, then the next meetings that they had, they did the divide and conquer method, where you had all these little tables that you could go and you could ask, and they didn't have any answers. No answers whatsoever.
Yep. When they divide you up and they do that, there's I'm not going to remember. Julia, you're on. Do you remember what it's called? The method. No, it was from a couple of the 60s radicals invented it, and it was named after them, and it's sticking in the front of my mind, and I can't think of what it is. But yeah, I mean, this was it's a Soviet era or a Soviet style way of doing meetings, such that they funnel you into where they want you to be instead of you know, trying to and they take advantage of the fact that mostly we try to be polite, you know, we try to go along, we try to do that. But I hate to tell everybody this, you're gonna have to stop. I don't say throw rocks, but I'm saying stand up and going, no, we're not doing that. No, we're not doing. I mean, you got to be the wrench in the machine, people. You can't just, we got to quit being nice. That's what's got us where we are.
Yeah, I agree. And so, you know, just a big general statement that we're going to keep letting our existing highways deteriorate while they use these cost overrun methods to keep building out when we're not even maintaining our existing infrastructure. It doesn't make sense to do things the way they're doing them. And then if you want to go.
Well, it does if you're trying to make money at it. And yeah, that's how it makes sense.
And then this, I can't remember where exactly this one came from, but very interesting. I mean, that goes back to the green space thing. And I agree with you at a certain point that, like, we don't want people to tell us what we do with our property, but at a certain point, we have to protect this planet a little bit. So having the ability to recharge our watershed and having cooler areas, because I mean, you can even feel it just on super hot summer days. There's a difference between driving down the highway and being in the shade of your front yard. Or
my farm is on a hill, on a big hill. There's a difference between the top of the hill and the bottom of the hill.
Right. Yep. And so the heat island effect, they're starting to pay attention to this. They even did like a study, I want to say it was this last spring, maybe, that some people participated. They had these like thermometer gauges on their cars so that they could, you know, start to figure out like, where is the heat island effect happening? And that study, I think it was here in Oklahoma City, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, but you know, they've been doing this. My master's was in biology, and I remember, so I graduated with my master's in 92, and I remember 90 even heat islands, studies on heat islands coming out, because I remember that was, you know, part of what I learned in college. So, I mean, this is not new stuff. I think it's just stuff that they attempt to bury, or they turn it into, because there's environmentalism. And I'm going to say this, there's radical environmentalism, and then there's being a good steward of your environment. Radical environmentalism tends toward tyranny. It's all about control. Environmentalism, however, is just being a good steward of the planet, being a good steward of your surroundings. You're exactly right when you say, which is why we fought biosolids, dumping of biosolids out here. That stuff gets into the drinking water. You know, it pollutes you. It changes, you know, your DNA structure. I mean, we don't, and I think especially with people who consider themselves conservatives, they get this, well, I'm not an environmentalist, right? Do you follow what I'm saying? Because they've made it so, because you've got on the other side, you know, Greta Thunberg, right?
Well, and let me tell you something interesting. So I studied terrorism extensively in my degree, because I don't even remember why. It was like a program, but I studied the Middle East and I studied terrorism, and it was a few classes, but I had an assignment one time that I was supposed to do a project on whether or not PETA, and it was another environmentalist group, but I was supposed to come back and tell the class how they were terrorists, because they were put on the FBI watch list for terrorism. They were some of the very first. And I just came back and basically was like, well, they're not terrorists because they're not committing violence against people. They're committing violence against buildings. And yes, there have been some radical things like attacking the boats that are out there whaling and you know, all that stuff that was going on. Yes, there was some radical behavior, but they
and spiking trees caused people to die in Oregon. So,
but and I did not know that.
Yes.
But the bigger point was like, why would the FBI put a bunch of environmentalists and people who, you know, PETA, like, why was that? And I think it goes back to that entrenchment of power that big industry really didn't like, these screaming people who were griping about their projects that they had. And they're the ones who are friends with government officials and, you know, the people who get to designate who and who isn't breaking the laws. And
Whitney, why would you consider people, why would you put people in jail who walked into a public building when they were asked to go into a public building after a former president gave a speech?
It's a tyrannical government. And I think that's kind of where this all kind of overlaps with the different causes that we all have and that we're advocating for, is that it just starts to look like we have a very tyrannical authoritarian government.
See, we're all friends. And we need to remember that. We're all friends, whatever our issues are. We're all friends when we realize that the government is our enemy.
Yeah. So the watershed, you know, we've already talked about the watershed, but there was a little bit of hope whenever the Bureau of Reclamation denied the OTA's request to cross some of their easements. I don't think this issue's actually been resolved. I don't know if they have to, I think they have to reapply. I don't know if they've done that yet. Maybe that's what Joe's going to get on now that he's deputy director, but we will see what happens with the Lake Thunderbird, you know, progress. And then if you want to go to the next one. So this was back almost a year ago when Drummond requested that Cindy Byrd can conduct an investigative audit. We still haven't seen that audit, so hopefully that's in the process.
Well, Cindy Byrd is a good lady. I know her.
Yeah.
I feel like elf. I know her. But I mean, she'll get it done. I mean, I think part of the problem that Cindy's office has had is just like we talked about before, there is rampant. I mean, it's just rampant misuse of government funds all over the place. So, I mean, she can only be in, 27 places at one time. So,
right.
I do believe she'll get it done.
I hope so. And then this is the last thing. So I have to just say, like, we have so much hope with Governor Drummond, and he has done so many things. I mean, he requested that audit. He said that in his opinion, our bill is constitutional. And then he also said that Tim Gatz couldn't hold those 3 positions. So I respect him, and I have a lot of hope with Governor Drummond and with Cindy Byrd.
Well, and it's interesting because Michael and I were, I think we were pretty super happy. Wouldn't you agree with the ruling where he came out against Stitt and said, no, you can't send public money to private schools. Now, that hasn't stopped the Stitt administration from doing that through our school choice setup. But we're not supposed to be doing that. So
he seems to want to uphold the law and not be pushed around so much by the entrenched political interest.
Well, we will keep watching for him.
This one's just kind of a joke. There's a thing. Yeah, there's a thing called induced demand. And so, like, when people tell me, Whitney, we really need this. Haven't you seen how bad the traffic is on I-35? And yeah. And I'm like, have you been to Houston? Have you driven on the Katy Turnpike? It is a prime example of when we build more people are going to use it. Yeah. They're going to use your receiver routes too. So now not only is your highway going to be worse, you're going to have more traffic on your everyday roads. So induced demand, I am amazed that in the engineering profession, it's not a malpractice to deny that induced demand is real. Induced demand has been proven by projects going all the way back to the Triborough Bridge and Robert Moses and all the things that he built. Every time he built a new bridge, it got congested within a very short amount of time. So that one's just kind of to be funny. And then I think the last one is the final slide. Yeah, so this is just our website. If anybody's interested, you can sign up for the newsletter. We try to keep it really up to date on all of our events. And we try to keep it up to date with the legislation that we're working on and just how people can get involved. We do community events. We did a chili cook-off just recently. And then we're probably going to have an event in the spring, maybe at the end of April. And then we'll for sure have an event in the summertime at Royal Bavaria. That's kind of our annual event. But it's a great group of people. That's the one silver lining to all of this nonsense going on with the OTA. I have met some really, really fantastic, smart, hardworking, active people. And even just getting to meet you guys, like, it's really interesting how serendipitously people come together when there is a problem like this.
Well, and I will say, it's funny that you say that about, Pike Off OTA. It was the same thing with me in Common Core. I will never, none of that was really successful, except, I do think it opened up some minds and got some parents thinking in a different direction, which was important. Mm-hmm. But my friendships with those people that, I started with were the best things that I ever formed. And I kind of want to finish out the segment by saying this. I am extremely, and if please don't let this sound condescending, because it is no way meant to be that. So please understand that. But I am so glad to see you as a younger person getting involved because, man, more people everywhere I go, people are my age or older. Mm-hmm. Well, I get that we have more time now at this age, and we have more time to devote, and I understand that, but I was doing Common Core when I had 4 kids at home, homeschooling them. You know, I mean, if you're concerned about something and you want to get involved, you'll make the time to do it. Anything outside of that is an excuse. It is. I was so disappointed by my kids' reactions to voting yesterday. You know, I actually had, 2 of the 3 that I talked to yesterday. I don't want to vote. I don't see what point does it make? I mean, it doesn't even make a difference. Why do I even want to do that? And, me saying, look at all the crap I've gone through in my life trying to stand up to the government, and you're going to tell me that voting doesn't make any difference? I mean, really? But this is where we are. I mean, the government has exceeded its bounds so far, like we said it was going to, decades ago. It's exceeded their bounds so far that now people feel like they can't even control their government, and it's their government. I mean, we're the people. They're our employees.
Right.
That's how the system works. So, I'm with you. Please get involved, people, and please go to Pike Off OTA and, look at what they're doing. And, I'm sorry, Michael had to jump off there because I want us to stay in contact, because what you're doing is important. And if you need to come on and give us some updates, or you've got something new and we need to, work you into a program, you are so welcome here.
Thank you.
All of us who understand what's going on have got to band together, because I do believe it's not safety in numbers that I'm talking about. I'm talking about when people see a group of people that are doing something that's kind of on the fringe of their thought process, but most of the people are not doing that. The larger the other side grows, the more people we get to our side, right?
Yeah.
So, expand your mind, people, and not with LSD. I'm not talking about the 60s. Just expand.
Yeah, and I think
it's common sense.
It's like you said, when we talked about doing this, it's getting the vocabulary and the discourse just in the general lexicon, because I think once people see it, you can't unsee it. That's where you're like, let me go take the blue pill now, because I want to go back to not knowing. But once you know. And the more that people become aware of what our government is doing, the better chance we have to take it back.
Well, let's hope so. And Whitney, I have enjoyed having you on so much. I mean, girl,
well,
you're awesome. You are awesome. Well, again, I've got to get Wendy between the whoas with the girls today. I'm like, Wendy. Got to get Wendy on here for just a second. She's got an update on some bills coming through for election integrity purposes. But thank you so much for being with us, Whitney. I'm serious. And thank you for what you're doing. I just can't tell you thank you enough. And you and I are now best friends. So...
Well, thank you. I had a ton of fun doing this, and we will definitely be in touch and get back together.
Thank you. I sure do appreciate you. And we will talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Have a great day.
Talk to you later. All right. Bye. And there's the other girl, the Wendy girl. Okay. So what's going on?
Election integrity. Election integrity is what's going on. I have a report to give everybody regarding the legislation that we were talking about when these bills were in committee. Okay. And I am happy to say that House Joint Resolution 1048, authored by Eric Roberts, to put ranked choice voting up as a constitutional issue for the people to discuss and as a referendum, that passed out of committee. So we need to make sure that that passes on the floor of the House. House Bill 3156 also passed, which is just a straight bill prohibiting ranked choice voting in the state. That is also authored by Roberts. So we have 2 chances there. You either have the legislature ban it or the people ban it constitutionally. So both of those passed, and we'll get to choose between those. Now, House Bill 3563 passed, and we need that to pass. That takes the school board elections, puts them over to November.
Need that to pass.
We need that badly. We need to make sure that hits the floor and that it passes the House. House Bill 3717, authored by O'Donnell, did pass out of committee. That does put a photo ID on our voter registration cards.
Okay.
With and using proof of identity. There was a similar bill in the Senate that did not, wasn't even heard in committee. And I'm thinking it's because this House bill was coming up as well. So we have House Bill 3815 by Dolans that came out of committee that prohibits foreign funding of our ballot measures. And House Bill 33.
Yeah, say that one right. Say that one again.
House Bill 3815, Representative Dolans, prohibiting foreign funding for ballot measures. That's very important. House Bill 3325, Clay Stairs, only U.S. citizens and bona fide residents of Oklahoma can vote. That clarifies the language in our statutes. Okay. That passed the Elections and Ethics Committee, and we need that to pass on the floor too. We need to clarify that only U.S. citizens are allowed to vote in Oklahoma. Okay. Maybe that will help us with the illegal driver's license situation.
Hey, quickly, have you written these down? Can you send them to me so I can stick them on the live video when we're done?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, ma'am. I do have them written down.
Okay.
And then what we need to be defeated on the floor of the House and the Senate is House Bill 4127, authored by Swopes, to allow the county commissioners to work with the county election boards to appoint county employees to administer our elections, basically, to allow county employees, people paid by the county, to work as precinct officials. Right now, the precinct officials are your fellow citizens who administer your elections. Why do we want county employees? So that's just somebody that's being paid by the state to come in and administer the elections. That makes absolutely no sense.
Well, this is the same person, Swope, who wants DHS to oversee every homeschooler too. So go figure on that, right?
Well, the same bill, though,
she's a tyrannist,
was passed. Yeah, was passed in the Senate, and it was authored by Senator Haste. Senate Bill 1989 passed out of committee. It is the same bill. So for whatever reason, the Uniparty is together in wanting county employees to administer our elections instead of our fellow citizens, who I just found out from my precinct official yesterday when I went to vote, they get paid $100 a day.
Yeah.
That's not a lot to sit there as long as they do. And you know, in Oklahoma County, what the line is like, taking your machine back to the election board. And we're going to talk about the machines. I found something else out yesterday that is very troubling. I had heard this as a rumor, but I never reported it because I try to verify things before I speak about them. And we will get to that in just a minute. People's heads will explode. Not heard on the floor. And we need to make sure that our legislators know that we want these bills and we need them. They were never heard in committee, even though they were filed. Senate Bill 1374, Nathan Dom's bill to watermark ballots. Senate Bill 2000, which is Dusty Deaver's bill, oath to attest to a physical address when you go to vote. You would have to say, this is actually my address, and sign that under oath before you're given a ballot, considering the way our voter rolls are messed up right now.
Correct.
Senate Bill 2032, which is your absentee ballot has to be returned by hand instead of electronically. They're trying to send out absentee ballots electronically.
Yes.
So if that happens, this would require someone to walk it back into the county election board, which is a very good idea if you're going to send out electronic ballots, which I do not recommend at all. I believe that practice needs to be abolished.
Well, and as a matter of fact, you and I have talked regularly about the fact that we really need to go back to doing absentee ballots the way it was, which is, you know, if you literally can't get out of your house or you're overseas. you get a
I'm
ballot.
getting to that. That was actually legislation that Nathan Dahm dropped in the Senate.
Yes.
That was Senate Bill 2034 to restrict absentee ballots to military and the truly infirmed.
Mm-hmm.
That died in the General Government Committee. That did not even get heard. That did not.
Who's the head of the General Government Committee?
Jessica Garvin.
Okay, so Jessica Garvin made sure that bill didn't get heard. Jessica Garvin is up for re-election. So those of you who have heard that realize Jessica Garvin is up for re-election, and she would not allow that bill to be heard in her committee.
Her committee also did not hear Senate Bill 1659, which we really need. That is Jack Stewart's bill to re-register Oklahomans to vote to clean up the voter rolls.
Okay, so Jessica Garvin does not want to clean up the voter rolls or to make elections in Oklahoma more transparent.
Well, there was an argument, and I heard this from Representative Roberts. He did email me because I emailed him and asked him about this. There is a question about the National Voter Registration Act, but my question is this. That was not written to protect the rights of people who are here in the country illegally somehow to get on our voter registration rolls and vote, because this re-registration bill would require that you go up to your, that you provide, your ID to get back on the voter rolls. There is also a question about senior citizens. I believe that our county election board officials can go in. Now we have the absentee ballot board that goes in and does the absentee ballots for people in nursing homes that can't get out. They can go in and they can register people and do it that way. Right. For re-registration. So the senior citizen argument, I'm not sure about that. I also don't think our seniors like to be treated like they're 2 years old, like they can't do something they really want to do either. I wouldn't make that that argument to them. I know my mom at age 85 doesn't like to be treated like she's a kindergartner. Unfortunately, no. But we don't want to try to create problems before they actually exist, and I think that's something that we could work around for our seniors. But yes, the issue with re-registration apparently has something to do with the National Voter Registration Act. Now, what I don't believe it's actually a problem. There was a court case that came out of Kansas that talked about concerns to that, and we can go into depth with that because I know we don't have time right now at a later date. But Bergstrom's bill, the language only citizens of the U.S. to vote, that didn't come out of committee, but it did come out of the House in another form.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so that was a Senate joint resolution. Okay, so there are things that if they didn't get heard in the Senate, they were heard in the House, but there were things that weren't heard at all.
Okay, and for those of you who don't know, that bills are getting ready to go across from Senate to House and vice versa. So
yes, we are having some votes on the floor. So we need to make sure that we are contacting our representatives to vote for the measures that we need and against the measures. And the calendar is not up. I don't have dates on when these bills are heard. I just recommend everyone as soon as possible, write your legislator, write your representative and your senator, and tell them to oppose House Bill 4127 and Senate Bill 1989. That is the county commissioners and the county employees being administering your elections. I'm not sure why we need county employees in our precincts as precinct officials.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I will edit this section off of the main video, and then we'll put this out with all of the information that you send me. I'll just copy and paste it in the description area. So anything else?
Yes, actually, I found out yesterday. Like I said, I had heard this, but someone else, when you hear something from someone, and then someone else says something differently, usually you wait and find out if you hear something again. I had heard this before, and it was verified by the state election board yesterday. I called up there. This is that important. I know precinct officials. I know some inspectors. I had someone tell me yesterday that they had picked up on Monday that they had picked up their machine for their precinct, and they had it on Monday, and that they were to take it to their polling place and set it up Tuesday morning, and that there was a letter that was sent out by their county election board, which requested that they do this.
Pick them up on the day before the election. You're supposed to pick them up on the day of the election, aren't you?
I called the state election board, and sure enough, the person that answered the phone verified that this is a practice, especially in the larger counties.
Oh, wow.
When I went to vote, I asked my precinct official that was there, 3 precinct workers, and he said, well, actually, our machine was delivered by the county election board here in Oklahoma County to the church on Monday. So the machine was delivered on Monday.
So there was no security with that machine, and it just sat there in a church?
There's no security with the machines that are being picked up at the county election boards the day before. I asked if there were any, if there were security measures that were given out. According to the state election board, there are supposed to be security measures that are given out. I was sent a letter by this county election board, and it states, and I sent you the graphic of it. I don't know if you can pull that up.
I can't, unfortunately.
So people can read. Yeah. I will read the letter really quickly. It's pretty short. I have it here. Please be reminded of the Tuesday, March 5th, 2024 preferential primary, and blank county special election. I'm not going to give you the county here. Please notify your judge and clerk and make arrangements to prepare your polling place. If you do not yet have the contact information for the polling place, please call the office for that information. The precinct officials that will be working with you are listed on the back side of the other letter. You may pick up your supplies at the election office between 8 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. on Monday, March 4th. Please call the office to make arrangements if you need to pick up before Monday. Please be reminded that you need to plug in the voting device and open the polls on the device as soon as possible after arriving at 6 a.m. on Tuesday morning. Do not wait until close to 6:45 to do so, because if for any reason the device doesn't work, we won't be able to fix it and you'll have people waiting in line, basically. As always, you're very much appreciated. Please do not hesitate to call if you have any questions. Signed, the Secretary of this county election board.
Well, I do think that's troubling. I mean, I hate to say that, but I do think that's troubling. I mean, things just aren't the same as they used to be. And for a voting machine to just be sitting someplace without having any kind of appreciable security, I think is really a bad deal.
It's a serious chain of custody issue with our machines. Yeah. And while we are told everything is safe and secure, that doesn't sound secure to me, even though I love the people that volunteer to work in our election.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
I love them to death.
And God bless them for doing that. They
normally do a great job, but the way our system is set up in Oklahoma, it only takes one compromised machine to infect the entire system. And so everything should be kept under strict lock and key and oversight by our officials until they are in your polling place, you know, until they are dropped off. The chain of custody overnight is a very serious problem, especially with the ways that we know, and we have been told by many experts now in the computer industry who have researched and studied these machines, as easily as they can be compromised. Somebody just hacked into one, using a pen, and that made national news. This is a problem. This is a serious problem. And I know our officials, for the most part, they are all upstanding people. But the question is, if they don't have the security in their home or wherever they're storing the machine, somebody can get into that if they know where they are. I mean, people can make up there are legions of problems with this, and it's the larger counties that are doing this, that are allowing the officials to come in the day before or even before then and pick up these machines and pick up their supplies and materials, and they are trusted to secure them until they get to the polling place.
And you verified this with the state election board.
I verified this with the state election board, and
all right.
I could not believe it, to be honest with you. I literally could not believe that those machines were out of their hands on the day before the election. I said, she said, well, you can't get in and get to a polling place and get the machine on election day. I see that point, but I don't. If we need to if we need to move the election times, if we need to have more people out transporting machines that are either deputies or whoever, the chain of custody needs to be tight on these machines. Right. And allowing people just to come in and pick and sign these things out. And, our precinct workers, like I said, they're pretty much volunteers. They only get paid $100 to do this. And a lot of them work more than 12 hours on election day. Yeah. But, if someone were to get a hold of a single machine in Oklahoma, it could spell problems for the entire system. And that's just, to me, an unacceptable risk. Well, and there has to be a better way to do this.
Yeah, we need to pay attention to that. Well, Wendy, we are almost at 2 hours, so I'm going to bump off of here for now. But thank you for coming on and visiting with us today. Like I said, I'll cut that aside. Please cut that off. So we've got a standalone. Please make sure you send me that information. So those of you who are still watching, that will all come out on that video, and then you'll have the bill numbers that you need to be watching. So thanks so much for coming on with us, Wendy, and giving us an update. I really do appreciate that. And sorry, we had to, kind of at the back of the program today, but thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
We'll get
so
this
much,
stuff out. Thank you, Wendy. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye. Everybody, thank you for being on and being with us. Michael had to get off just a second. He's got an ongoing issue that he's having to deal with. He does actually have a job. And so he's taking care of that today. But thank you guys for being on. We had a great audience today. Please pay attention to what's going on with OTA. Please pay attention to everything that's going on. Question everything. And then after you question it, make sure that you're working as hard as you can to get legitimate, common sense answers to those questions that you're posing. So thank you again for being with us today. We really appreciate that. It was great to have Whitney on. We hope to have her back again, and we'll be seeing Wendy Dial again before the end of the session as well. So hang in there, and thank you. Have a great day, and we'll see you again on Friday with Representative Sherry McConley will be on with us, and we'll be talking about quite a number of things, all back on education on Friday. So be with us, and then please join us then. We'll see you at 9 o'clock on all of our regular channels.